All right. Well, we are now live here with Dr. Burch. If you're joining us on the live stream, we're going to hang out for just about 5 minutes. So that way people who are live can join us, and we'll get into our live recording of the podcast. But yeah, excited to have you, Dr. Burch. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Feel free to call me Greg.
All right, sounds good.
If you can, right?
I know, seriously. I haven't had you as a professor, so I might be able to.
Yeah, you'll be able to pull that off. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's a lot of fun to be with you guys and talk a little bit about mission, the heart of God, and have some fun in the midst of it too. Great to see you, Jonah.
Yeah, good to have you on, man.
It's good to be here.
Been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Jonah, have you had a class with Greg before?
I haven't, but he came and talked at our church actually.
That's right.
So he came to our ministry, and we also sat. I was thinking about this because I didn't know you at the time, but we also sat in on your talk at Student Connection 2019.
That's right, man. Good memory. Yeah,
we were in your session. I remember that when I saw you on campus, I was like, wait a minute, that guy looks familiar. And I put two and two together later on.
Well, I remember a bunch of youth from Damascus being there, so that was a lot of fun to reconnect with everybody.
Yeah, we populated like half of the
2/3, maybe even. Who knows?
Yeah.
Thanks for your support. I needed some happy, smiley faces. You never know what people are gonna do when you're speaking.
That's true. He was actually one of the OG like keynote speakers at the first Student Connection. Like
really?
They're
awesome.
they're not called keynote. Like what are the main
plenary?
Yeah. Plenary, yeah.
That's
cool.
right.
That was a couple years back, 2017 maybe, something like that.
Was it 17 or 16? I can't
16 maybe.
Student Connection was. Yeah.
I just do what Ryan Fast tells me, Yeah, Ryan says, hey, come join us. And I just listen to the guy. I respect him so much. He's the director, as you know, of Student Connection. And so if he invites me, I show up.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically why this podcast exists. We just do what Ryan tells us.
Ryan told us to. Yeah, exactly. Ryan's our boss.
Thank you, Ryan, if you're listening.
Yeah. He was a guest a couple weeks ago, too.
Oh, cool.
It was really fun. We got to have him on. He's a good guy. Yeah.
Sure is.
Were you guys able to go to a Mission Connection this year at all? They did like an online thing.
Yeah, I was there. I required my students to go, so I thought I should probably show up, Yeah,
Totally.
yeah, it was really good. Heard of some great talks. Actually, was able to host one of the workshops for my former member care director with the organization I worked with. So I was able to help facilitate the Zoom side of things and share a little bit. So that was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of meet people from around the world since it was virtual. There's some benefits to going virtual.
Totally.
That's true. Yeah. So my interaction with Mission Connection was I was a host as well for a guy who was in England. So he did. It's called Mobilizing the UK. That was the name of the track. So I hosted a couple of his, and it was just interesting. There are people from like all over England that was like joining his breakout session, which that was interesting. I'm like, these people might not have come to Portland for this, but
right,
here they are.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I think that was what Bill McLeod, the president of Mission Connection, was really hoping for. That, hey, let's take advantage of this opportunity to go global and really pull people in. And so that was exciting to be a part of Mission Connection this year.
Awesome. Yeah. It's definitely cool how they capitalized on the fact that they couldn't do it how they originally planned. It was cool to watch them pivot that. I was also surprised. There's a lot of familiar faces in some of the what's it called, the booths as well. I don't know, maybe just from like being around Multnomah and being in the Portland area. I'm like, I recognize some of these people. Kind of weird.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. I didn't get to explore the booths.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Who's there, Jonah, that you recognize?
Well, some people actually from Canada, which is weird. CanIL has campus on like Trinity's campus. So I recognize people from there. Other people from Multnomah one, there's some professors I recognize, like Kutz was in the video they showed. I don't know him personally, but that was kind of a small world thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we go ahead and go live right now? 4:08. I'm going to do a little built-in countdown thing, and as soon as that's over, we will officially be live. You good, Jonah?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Well, hello and welcome to the Church in Context podcast. I'm here with Jonah, finally. It's the first time all month that I've been on. Thanks for
It's the first year, I think, that we've been on the podcast together.
That's right, the first time all year. That's true. Wow, it has been a crazy month, but it's good. It's good to be back. Yeah, wow. Here we are at the end of January. Not much has happened this month, so I think it's okay that we haven't.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Fine. Whatever.
Right. Hey, we are here with Dr. Greg Burch of Multnomah University. He's our special guest with us today. Dr. Burch, how are you doing today?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Doing really well. Yeah, I just got out of class, literally, and walked into my office, and here we go. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be on with you guys.
I love it. That's the beauty of all this technology. I guess probably the blessing and the curse, right? That you're able to do different things like that and to kind of be in different places at once. And sometimes that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's hard to draw those boundaries, but I'm so glad they're able to be with us.
It's a good thing today. So I'm really stoked to be with you guys.
Yes. I know I'm especially excited, and Jonah too, because we're both students at Multnomah University. So we're excited to have Dr. Burch on to just kind of plug a university that we love, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit. Just having a professor from Multnomah University up here in Portland, made me think of continuing this trend that Jonah has started in the last 2 weeks that he's been hosting without me, of stereotypes. So I was listening. So 2 weeks ago, you did youth pastor stereotypes, which were very accurate.
I think so.
You did Canadian stereotypes last week. So I thought today, instead of our usual segment of odd stories, I thought instead we could do stereotypes about a professor. And I want to see if Dr. Burch here will agree or disagree. And professors, I'm sure, are somewhat different, in how they approach and different personalities. But we'll have to see if there's any that he can either resonate with personally, or maybe some of his colleagues down the hall are similar.
Hopefully they can't overhear us.
Right. He's pointing at the wall, so we'll have to see. Okay, so the first one, I'll start off, and Jonah, if you have any others, go and throw them in. So the first one, when you think of a university professor, I think of someone who is absent-minded. So absent-minded being they're able to write a book, right? But they don't know what day of the week it is. Like that kind of thing. They're able to construct, finish a doctorate degree. They're able to oversee PhD students, but they can't remember where they put their keys. like that. Does that sound familiar? Is that you, or you don't have to name anyone by name, but
if you want to?
John, so you have someone in your life that works very closely with me, your wife.
Yes.
And she could probably give you some good insights on the craziness that happens in the Global Studies department here. As well as others. But, I have to admit, there are moments where I am wandering around the halls of of Multnomah University, like trying to figure out where I put like my left shoe. So, and speaking of shoes, I actually showed up to class one time with 2 different pairs of shoes on, man. No joke. I woke up in the morning. This is like when I was first starting off here at Multnomah University. I'd wake up really early in the morning and it was still dark, not trying to wake up my kids and my wife. So I put 2 pairs, I put my shoes on. I showed up and literally in class, I looked down and I have 2 different shoes on. It was so embarrassing. So I don't know. Does that fit your criteria, your stereotypical criteria?
That's a good story. Yeah. I love it. Jonah, do you have any stereotypes? I've got a small list here, so if you don't.
Yeah. One that I always think of is that professors are generally really, really, really into whatever it is that they're teaching. Maybe it's just stereotypical from movies where professors are just like yelling at students for not getting it, or like really want them to learn and to care about like agriculture or like whatever they're talking about. Do you think is that true? Are professors like, I guess I'd say one-dimensionally like really passionate about this one thing that other people don't care about? I don't know. Do you think that's true in some of your colleagues?
Man, well, one thing I was taught years ago in homiletics and other classes on public speaking, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Is the importance of being passionate about what you're teaching, Yeah. So I'm sure there's been moments when I have been teaching, let's say on like ethnocentrism and anthropology, or I've been like talking about, I don't know, something silly, and I've probably come across passionate about it because I want my audience, my students, to think that this is important stuff, right?
That's true.
So no doubt, usually I am pretty passionate about it. I'm not faking it, but so I would say that is also a very accurate stereotype, Jonah. I hate to admit it, but yeah.
So another one, and this is, I love this, that this stereotype has increased with the pandemic, is that professors often have a lot of issues with technology, like more than normal. And kind of to build on that stereotype even more, when they have technology issues, they don't take responsibility for it. They will either blame the tech guy, they'll blame the technology itself, or my favorite in like a Christian university is they'll blame like a technology demon that's like maybe there is an element of spiritual attack. I don't want to say that's not real, but a lot of times I hear that. I've heard that at Multnomah of this is spiritual attack that I cannot teach what I'm passionate about. Is that accurate?
Man, this is where I'm going to remove myself from this conversation and just point down the hall to some of my colleagues here. There are some really funny stories about profs and technology that have been passed down from generation to generation. Let's put it that way around here. Anywhere from profs, talking to copiers, trying to get copiers because they believed it was voice command, to all kinds of interesting stuff going on. But these days it's just a huge challenge, John. I mean, I just got out of class, right? So I'm multitasking. I'm not a multitasker. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe profs aren't multitaskers. But my wife would agree. I'm not a multitasker. So I'm literally in class just now. And I've got, 7 students online. I've got 6 students in the classroom. And I don't know where to look. Like, do I look at my students in the classroom or do I look at the camera, right? And so it is honestly just, that's probably another accurate stereotype. You guys are good, man. You guys deserve A's for this. But no doubt there's some accurate stereotypes around that as well. But I'm just going to point down the hall and just say it's mostly them.
Oh, my goodness. And that adds a whole other dynamic of having, because Multnomah is unique in that it's allowing on-campus students, but it's also allowing students to not go on campus if they're either uncomfortable, if they're kind of health compromised in some way. they're at risk. That's more the word.
Yeah.
So people can be both streaming live and in person. But my favorite tech issue, this is from last semester. One other professor at Multnomah that I had, he had those online students over Zoom, and he couldn't figure out how to use the nice high-tech camera that each of the rooms has at Multnomah.
Uh-huh.
So he could figure out how to use the document camera. So he picked up the document camera and pointed it at students.
That's awesome. Well, good. That shows some resiliency, I think.
Resilience, I love it.
Yes. Jon, keep in mind too, I mean, there's students on Zoom that are in the classroom with us right now. This is all what we call adaptive learning, an adaptive learning environment, right? Ready to adapt to the circumstances. So we have students on Zoom, we have students in the classroom, and we also have students that are asynchronous, meaning that they can't, for whatever reason, be online in class live. So we're having to record the lectures and make sure those get onto our class platform. And they watch it later, and then we have a correspondence with them about what they watched. So there's kind of three audiences that we're dealing with right now. And it's a little challenging, but it's working for us in the midst of this global pandemic, right?
That's great. I think Multnomah's done a great job of adapting in that way. Jonah, any other stereotypes?
Yeah, one that I've always, this is partly a stereotype, something I think I've come to believe, but I want to know if it's true or not. And there's like a more definite like true or false answer to this. But when professors get together, especially with people like in their field, do those conversations look different than conversations with like any other human being? Because I've been around some professors or overheard people talking, and like it's way above me. I can't follow. I don't know. When you're in a room full of other professors, does the conversation, is it just like you're talking about things you don't normally get to talk about in life? Yeah.
Man,
always wondered.
I'm in a very narrow field, right, of global studies and mission and international development work. It's actually quite broad. But anyways, but I'll be in these conversations with some of our theology professors, our professors of biology, and literally I am so lost at times. As I listen to these conversations, I feel like, man, maybe I should just put my student clothes back on, because I don't know what's going on here in this conversation. And so I think that happens. You start throwing out these words. I mean, you can lose people pretty fast, and I like to keep things real, right? So it's like I'm more of a practitioner at heart. So like, hey, if it doesn't make sense and doesn't work, then why are we talking about this? But that's just kind of a little bit more me. So I don't know if I fit that stereotype, but I'll let others decide that.
People down the hall again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, darn people down there.
Ask Jon. I mean, John's wife's in all of our department meetings, right? Yeah. So maybe Katie knows.
She loves it. She loves conversations. Okay, this is one. So one of my something I've done part-time for a couple of years is be adjunct faculty. So this is one that really resonates with me. I'm going to see if it resonates with you too. Is that the number one frustration for professors is when a student does not read or refer to the syllabus before asking questions. Is that true, or is there something more frustrating?
Man, I can't tell you how many times I just want to say, have you read the syllabus, right? Yes. It's in the syllabus. That's not my MO. That's not how I operate always necessarily, although that's what I'm thinking, right? So if you hear me respond to a student like, hey, let's have a conversation about that, what I'm thinking is it's in the syllabus. Yes. Read the syllabus, and maybe I need to do that a little bit more often, but it's really true. But then again, there's syllabi that are out there. Syllabi, by the way, is plural for syllabus, in case you're wondering. But there's syllabi that are out there that don't make sense either. So I can see why students are constantly asking questions, especially if it's like a 30-page dissertation, of some professors' like opinions on whatever.
Yeah. Good point.
So I'm empathetic. I'm not that far removed from being a student. So although, yeah, I guess I am more and more each day, but I still get it. I get the fact that sometimes we overcomplicate things and let's keep it simple, right?
Mm-hmm. Jonah,
I'm writing down a note here.
Yeah. So I still remember in my first day of undergrad, we met all the profs in my department. And one at a time, we asked them what they were interested in. And all of them said hiking. One after another, every single prof in that department was interested in hiking. Is that a professor thing? Is that yeah?
That's a middle age thing, man. Maybe I don't know. It's like, yeah, I have hiking on my list of things too.
Yeah,
sure.
Is that common for like a lot of? Because it's also, I think, probably I went to undergrad and I'm going to seminary now in the Pacific Northwest, so it might just be a Pacific Northwest thing. But
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if I were to like poll my students, they would probably say the same thing. A lot of them, so
probably
that's the beauty of. And every place I've lived, I've been close to hiking trails, so that's just what we do as a family. Or maybe I'm just middle aged. I don't know.
It's free. You're outside. It's all good.
Yep.
This is my last one. So I don't know if you have any more, Jonah. Last one. This has to do with working for a Christian university specifically. Is it true that it's a requirement that you have to use one of these two phrases or words in every lecture? Either one, you have to use Imago Dei, or two, you have to use Trinity or Trinitarian. Like what two has to be in your lecture. I don't know if I've had a lecture without one of those two words.
That is really funny. I'm laughing because I swear, no joke, I didn't use Trinitarian, but I used it last week in the class I just got out of, which is intercultural communication, but I used Imago Dei probably throughout my lecture today, man. So that is a prerequisite. If you don't, among some of us, if you don't use Imago Dei and you don't use Trinitarian, you're on the outs. They're going to get kicked out of the club. So I take that role very serious, man. Imago Dei and Trinitarian, whatever. It could be Trinitarian use of the ping pong table, but whatever it might be, man, you gotta include those. Yeah, don't let the secret out. So that's it.
Your approach to class right now, being in person and asynchronous and online, like zooming in, that's Trinitarian.
That is very
Trinitarian. There we go. Three. That's modalism. Anyways. Yeah. But a question I had for you as well. This is one thing, again, just that I've observed, and I want to see if you've observed it too. I feel like whenever a professor went to college, that is their favorite time in history, and like they're really into it. So I had this professor in my undergrad who, one day for a class, it was a class on like theology. We went over Barth, all these really like deep people. And one day for class, he told us, he's like, I wanted to play you the entirety of a recording of Pink Floyd's The Wall concert, but I was told I can't do that. I don't know. Do you think that's true? Do a lot of professors, like, whenever they were in college, really rally around that time in history?
Man, I actually haven't had a conversation with too many. I don't even know, like with my colleagues here at Multnomah, I probably don't even know where half of them went. For me, it was instructional. It was instrumental, I think, in forming me as a person. But most of my memories have something to do with like going out and spending the night outside camping in my Volkswagen bus with friends. So it wasn't the classroom experience. Sorry, profs of mine that are listening to this conversation, but it happened in those relationships with people, and spending time with people and just having a lot of fun, actually. I didn't do well academically in college, so I'm kind of a late bloomer, so to speak, I guess. But so it wasn't that piece as much as it was just learning to fall in love with Jesus, and learning from the friends that I had here at Multnomah, where I went to college.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we talked a lot about, being part of a university, being a professor. We mentioned that, you're a professor at Multnomah University in Portland, Oregon. But besides that, can you introduce yourself and more specifically, what do you do at Multnomah? And besides, hike on your days off. And so what do you oversee? What do you do? And yeah, just a brief introduction of who you are.
Sure, I'd love to. Hey, thanks for having me on as well. It's a joy to be, on your podcast, Church in Context, and I've previously have seen you guys and watched your video as well as listened to the podcast. So it's kind of fun to be on here with you. Yeah, my name's Greg Burch, and I oversee the Global Studies Department here at Multnomah University. Within the Global Studies Department, we have a college degree, Global Studies. We have a number of different concentrations, which I could share with you in just a few minutes. We also have a graduate program, a master's program in global development and justice. And that looks at humanitarian work around the world and those working in international long-term development contexts, where we are working to improve poverty conditions and impoverished communities. And so there's some really good tools that we talk about how to work in creating jobs and creating opportunities for people in some really challenging and oppressive situations. I'm not a native to Oregon. I've lived here for a number of years now, about 15 years total. I'm a native Californian, grew up in Southern Orange County, and moved up to Oregon when I came to college here at Multnomah. Pursued a college degree in biblical studies with an emphasis in missions. And I fell in love with Oregon, but didn't stick around very long. I moved to Caracas, Venezuela, in South America, and lived there for a number of years. Eventually got married, and we moved back to Venezuela, my wife and I. I oftentimes refer to myself as the abnormal one in my family. My wife was born in Vienna, Austria. My kids, Tyler and Kira, were both born in Venezuela. So I'm the only one born in the U.S. If you consider California part of the U.S., I know there's some doubt out there. And so I'm kind of the abnormal one in that sense. But after I got married, my wife and I moved to Venezuela, back for me, because I had already lived there, and worked with homeless youth. After about 7 years in Venezuela, we worked in Costa Rica and Central America, where I taught in a Christian university seminary called the CEPA, which is really the School of Pastoral Studies, and worked primarily with students that were interested in going out as missionaries, Latin American missionaries, and those wanting to work with at-risk youth and children in particular. So I could share more about that. So that's a little bit about who I am. I've been here now at Multnomah for almost 9 years. I teach, and I also, function as an administrator of our programs here at Multnomah.
That's awesome. When you were getting your undergrad, were you planning on becoming a professor, or was your undergrad, did you have kind of another aspiration originally?
No way, man. I never, ever imagined being a professor. I mentioned earlier, I had my own academic struggles as a college student. I was more concerned with not being in the classroom and being with my friends. And I was actually quite focused on ministry at the time too. And that kind of pulled me away from my studies as well. I was a volunteer youth ministry guy, and worked in a church for a number of years. And so that kept me quite busy and had to make money. So I worked as well. But yeah, no way. I never dreamed of being a professor at that time. But, after a number of years of working in Venezuela, I went and pursued graduate studies because I figured out there was a lot I needed to learn about our work, working with homeless kids and at-risk kids, and fell in love with academics when I was in graduate school. And it just came alive for me. And that's when I started envisioning and dreaming of the possibility of being a professor one day. And then went on to pursue a doctorate, and just knew that that's who, that was my next step in life after our work on the field.
That's great. You also mentioned that you were from South Orange County. What town?
I grew up in Mission Viejo.
Mission Viejo. Yep. I grew up
just outside of
Pass, so we're both from California.
Yep, very close. Yep.
That's right. Cool. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to unpack that a little bit more. To your work in Venezuela and Costa Rica. So, you mentioned, kind of touched on that a little bit, but what maybe explain a little more what work you did especially in Venezuela. You mentioned kind of more of that pastoral training, it sounds like, in Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
But what work did you in Venezuela that you first moved there and then you came back too with your wife?
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of my past because I was in and out of different countries, but I'll try to unpack it a little bit for you. So when I was a student here at Multnomah, we had an opportunity to do internships as part of our program. And so I went to Venezuela. I went to some other places too. That deeply impacted me, but Venezuela was really formational in getting me to the type of work I ended up doing. So as a junior here at Multnomah, I had the opportunity to go to Venezuela and join some friends that were starting this new organization, just a small little nonprofit in Venezuela that was working with homeless youth. So I spent a few weeks over my summer kind of getting to know Caracas, which is the capital of Venezuela. It's a mega city of, between 5 and 7 million people live there. And in that city are homeless kids, anywhere from the age of 8 on up. And so I spent a few weeks getting to know the context and getting to know kids that actually lived on the street. And I was so deeply impacted by that. Came back to Multnomah, and after finishing up my senior year, I knew where I was going, and I was going straight back to Caracas, to Venezuela, to reach those kids, right? And was invited by the organization and invited by my friends who were from a Calvary Chapel in Southern California, who sent them out. And they invited me to join in with what they were doing, what God was doing in the lives of these kids. And those initial couple years, I was single, lived with a Venezuelan family out at this rural ranch where the kids were being rescued, and spent honestly more time working with kids on the streets than anywhere else, just finding them underneath bridges, sharing lunches with them, sharing the good news with them. And those were hard years, really hard years, because of the context and the kids that we were working with. But they were also just transforming years for me, as well as some of the kids that we saw leave the streets. And, I had mentioned that I got married. So I got married when I came back to the States for graduate school. And my wife and I, Christina, we decided that we would go back to Venezuela and continue the work with the youth. And that time I moved into more leadership position and supporting the organization, but continued to support the work with kids directly on the street. And man, we saw some lives radically transformed, just almost miraculously. I would say it was miraculously. It took a long time, in some cases, years, working with some of the young people, but just phenomenal stories of kids that used to be on the street sniffing glue every single day that, now, if you were to ask me what they're doing today, some of them are leaders of ministries and churches. And it's just really, really has been an awesome journey to kind of witness that. I was just chatting with one of those kids that I worked with back many years ago, who's now the director of that same organization, but in the Dominican Republic. And, now married, been married for a number of years, has 5 precious kids. And when I think back to him and where he was at when I first met him, when I was doing that internship, it's just, it's nothing short of just absolute miraculous workings of God in the lives of some of these young people. So you can see why I'm a little bit passionate about this subject and working and training our students to do this work. We have a children at risk emphasis concentration in our global studies program, where students are coming into the program preparing to do this type of work. So I'm pretty passionate about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You use this term at risk. And I think that's a term that's thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean for a kid to be at risk?
Yeah, so I'll give you a formal definition, then I'll just kind of break it down and we can talk about practically what does it look like. So a good friend of mine defines children at risk as children in danger of not reaching their God-given potential, physically, environmentally, mentally, socially, and spiritually. So it's these young, and obviously we're thinking theologically as we're thinking about what do we mean by children at risk, right? But it's basically those that are not living up to the potential that they have in life. There's environmental factors, there's physical limitations, there's social, mental, and spiritual limitations. These are all risk factors There's adverse childhood, experiences as well that affect young people because of difficult and challenging backgrounds. Those are called ACEs. And so there's a number of factors that kind of lead to young people having extra challenges, extra hurdles. And, some people say, well, aren't all kids at risk? And yeah, I think we would probably agree that is the case. But there's some that, due to their circumstances, due to their family environments, due to their environmental circumstances, have some extra hurdles and are a little bit more at risk than other kids that are growing up in healthy communities and healthy families.
As we think about, the name of our podcast, Church in Context, right? What can the church do as a response? There's definitely here what you did, moving to Caracas, and there's definitely, that, people can do that. Thinking of students who, maybe they're teenagers right now, and probably, at least my parents wouldn't let me move to Venezuela when I was like 15, right? Like that kind of thing. So what are some things that we can do? Maybe it's a two-part question. Maybe starting with the church in general, not so much the students just yet, but just the general, especially the American church. What can we be doing with children at risk?
Man, there's so many different directions we can go with this, John. I appreciate the question too, because this is where it gets down to. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where it becomes very practical, right? And that's what I began to talk about, the practical side of defining children at risk. So, but let's get into a little bit more of like how we can respond. And I would say there's kind of probably four main ways that the church can engage with at-risk youth and children. And practically, I don't know if we'll have the time to get into everything, but we can certainly consider ourselves as a community. If you read scripture long enough, you're going to encounter God describing himself as the defender of the fatherless and the orphan. He also is the defender of the widow and anyone in society that is living in the margins or living on the periphery of community. Anyone who doesn't have access to power, or anyone who doesn't have access to contributing to their own family, household, and health. God is quite concerned with them.
Yeah.
And so as the church, I think it starts with being concerned about those things that God is concerned about. As he calls us to defend the orphan and the fatherless. I think that's where it starts, like having a mindset of who is it that's in our community that finds themselves on the margins of our community? Who is it in our community that finds themselves in a place of being at risk? And oftentimes that starts with some of the most vulnerable people, which are children and young people in our communities who don't have access to correcting their situation, maybe, perhaps. But I think about this issue of justice. I believe that the church is a community of justice, a community that promotes and advocates for justice. And justice in a biblical sense is making things right as God intended for them to be. So whether it be, and I would just throw out some examples, whether it be a church focusing on, a time of prayer for children and young people in our communities that are at risk. I think that's critical. Maybe it's a church that is hosting an evening to talk about foster care and providing foster care for young people in our communities that find themselves under the protection of Child Protective Services and DHS. Maybe it's a respite night for people who are actually fostering kids and doing background checks on certain people in the church so they can care for kids, give foster parents a night off. And take a break. So there's lots of things practically we can do, but correcting things that are wrong in our community starts with really recognizing ourselves as a justice community. And this idea of justice has been, how do I put it? has been really kind of taken out of context in the church. But justice is really kind of ensuring that God's values are extended in society and people are treated with equality and equitably. And that includes kids in our communities as well. So seeing the church as a justice community, recognizing that we are a community that should protect as well, is another important point, I think, in our discussion. Like, how are we protecting kids, not only in our church? By the way, it should be, and we should have that conversation of, are we ensuring that kids are safe and protected in our churches? Do we have good child protection policies? Are kids feeling safe? Can they open up to our youth pastors and counselors in our churches about what they're feeling or what they're dealing with without being judged? Those are really important topics as well. But also thinking about, how do we provide for the physical and spiritual needs of young people in our churches? So, looking at the church as a community of protection, but also looking at the church as a community of provision. So are we providing for young people in our church? And the last thing I would say, are we a community that invites young people to participate? And no offense, you guys are youth pastors, right? So, and I am too, right? But sometimes we segregate, or we put youth in the youth group, and they're not participants in our communities, in our larger communities at church. So I would say, for pastors and others, are we including young people in our churches? Because they have something to say, right? They have a voice. And you look at how God he used so many people in scriptures that were young people. I think of Miriam, Moses' sister, and how God used her. I think of Samuel being the mouthpiece for the high priest Eli. I think of the boy with fish and loaves, how the Lord used him. So kids in scripture are used by God as they speak about God. And so I would say we're also a community that should include young people's voice in our communities as well. So justice, protection, provision, and certainly allowing for young people's participation in our communities. Those are at least 4 ways we can get our churches to support young people here in our communities. And that's not even including the work of getting involved with God's mission around the world.
That's really good. I really appreciate the focus on your community and what's going on, like, locally. I think a lot of times churches can have a kind of like a savior complex where they'll go out, and they'll sponsor the child in Africa. It's kind of the stereotype, right? They'll sponsor them, but they might walk right past the orphan, that's their neighbor or something like that, and go to do that. And if it's immediate, if it's right next to you, it's a lot harder to deal with than it is to send some $30 a month off somewhere. So I appreciate that focus of really fixing fixing where you're directing your love to at the beginning, and kind of letting that love for others grow outward instead of starting off far away. And there's a gap there if you're not treating your neighbor with love when you're trying to reach kind of these far ends of the earth. So I love that local focus, and just
Well, I was once told, nothing magical happens when you get on the plane and put that seatbelt on. Like you don't become a super missionary when that happens. It starts at home, right? It starts in our communities. It starts in our schools. And for those of you who are in high school and maybe junior high, I realize it's hard to live out the mission field in our schools. I remember that challenge myself. I was 16, going on 17, and had finally really committed my life to Christ. And it cost something when I went back to school after that summer of really kind of seeking God, and going back into school and sharing my faith with my friends there in my local community. That was hard. And so, but if you are interested in going into international missions and supporting people groups around the world, whether it be children at risk or others that are unreached. It really does begin here and now. And yes, you need to be sensitive to the context. You guys talking about this a lot, I'm sure, church and context. You need to absolutely be sensitive to the context that you're living in and working in. But again, nothing magical happens when we put that airplane, when we sit in that airplane seat and put the seatbelt on. It happens here and now.
That's good.
That's awesome. And I love your heart for youth that came out of that as well, getting youth to be involved. I think it's really big. There's a lot of problems in our world today, and they're probably not going to go away in our lifetime. So what are we doing to prepare the next generation? So I think the work you do at Multnomah, getting people ready for that, the work you've done, in my youth group, being willing to come and to talk to kids about that is amazing. So it's a blessing.
Thanks, Jonah.
Yeah, that's something that's on your heart. So I guess just getting down to the really nitty gritty, practical situation of it in a youth context. You touched on this a bit, but some of our youth might go somewhere to serve. Some of them might have peers that are at risk for various reasons. Maybe friends who don't come from the best homes, or friends who have some kind of struggles in their life. What can they do to be a good friend to their peers who are at risk?
That's a great question, Jonah. And I think you just highlighted where we start. It's being a good friend, right? A good friend is someone who listens. A good friend is someone who is not quick to judge someone. And yes, there are good decisions and there are bad decisions. We all acknowledge that. But friends that are, getting themselves into trouble, we could list 1,000 things, right? But friends that are getting themselves into trouble are just coming from a challenging home life. What they need more than anything is a good friend, and someone who's going to listen to them, someone who's going to be patient with them. And there might come a time when we need to reach out and find professional help. There might be a time when we need to reach out to others that maybe have more experience dealing with some of the risk factors that they are facing, whether that be substance consumption or whether that be, unsafe sex or premarital sex. All of these issues that young people are dealing with that we all have dealt with as well. Sometimes we just need to invite other people into the conversation that have a little bit more experience. But going back to that issue of just, being a friend is someone who listens, someone who supports, at times speaks truth into their lives as well. And if we really are recognizing some significant issues of abuse, there's abuse hotlines. It would take you 2 seconds to Google. And there's also people around you that can support you in that process. And so, advocating too. An advocate is someone who defends, someone who says something. And so we're all called to be advocates for young people that maybe are in at-risk situations. And advocate is acknowledging the issues and finding someone who could help. So I think that's part of it as well. I think of my own years as a teenager, and I was spending a lot of time with some people that were doing some really unhealthy things with their lives. And I even found myself there as well. And it took people to call me to a better place in my life. It took people being truthful with me, but also not judging me, and also not, talking more than listening. So I think that those were people that had a significant impact on me. They were willing to speak the truth, but also willing to listen and not be too quick to judge.
Yeah, so just being there for your friends, and then if you have questions that are over your head, going in and getting help. Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic advice.
I think kind of that theme too of the church being a safe space, and as a friend not being quick to judge, just as you ended that too. Yeah, providing that safe space is huge.
Yep.
For the real problems that are going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I try to do that with my students, even in the classroom, like create a safe space so they can share without feeling like everybody's attacking them. And that's what we need in our churches as well.
Absolutely. So you said that children at risk is one of the things that you emphasize, or one of the emphasis in your degree programs. What are your other ones for your undergrad?
Yeah, in the undergrad in global studies, so we have the children at risk concentration. We have a sustainability concentration. So for students that are really concerned about environmental issues, creation care, being good stewards of God's creation, we have a beautiful community garden that we recently just outside the doors of my office. Beautiful community garden. So sustainability. We have a concentration in culture and diversity. So those wanting to work in multicultural context here in the United States, especially. We also have international studies. So for students wanting to go and spend a semester in Europe or semester in Africa or Asia or Latin America, they focus on those regions. We also have global ministry, of course, which is those not quite sure what they want to do, but wanting to go and do ministry globally or internationally. And most of our global study students global ministry students are going out and preparing to be missionaries as well. So yeah, we have those 5 concentrations.
That's fantastic. I mean, wow, you think about pressing issues in the news today, like that I know that's been around for a while, but that feels very cutting edge, like a lot of those concentrations. That's fantastic.
Well, I'm so inspired by what our students are doing in sustainability with children at risk, global ministry, culture and diversity, and international studies. They go and they come back and they share stories with us, and I'm just blown away with how God is using them in the midst of those different contexts around the world.
Good. Oh, wow. Thank you for that conversation. Thank you for all the insight. There's a lot of good takeaways there.
Hey guys, my pleasure. It was really a joy to join you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. If you're open to hang on for a couple more minutes, we have one segment we like to do each week, and that's just to kind of think about what's going on, maybe in the news, maybe in our personal lives, just one thing that we cannot get over that is, it could be big, could be, worldwide, nationwide, it could be something that's just significant to us. Jonah, why don't you lead us off? What do you got?
So this is a pretty big deal to me. I don't know if it's big globally, but John and I were talking beforehand, and apparently Kellogg's now has mashup cereal. It's a game changer. I found Frosted Flakes and Fruit Loops in the same box. It looks like something that would be on a clearance aisle. I found it on a clearance aisle, and it's fantastic. And maybe it's not a big deal to the rest of the world, but as a struggling seminary student, it feels like the food of my people. This feels like something I should be eating my whole life. So I know there's more serious things going on in the world, I'm sure, than that. But to me, the context of what John and I have been talking about before, that's one that's on my heart this week.
Can you explain what a mashup is? Like, what are you even referring to?
So if you're watching on video, it's this. If you're listening in, it's this, I guess. It's pre-mixed cereal. There is Frosted Flakes and Fruit Loops in the same box. It's not like 2 separate bags. You open it up, there's one bag, 2 types of cereal. It's kind of like it's one step away from being a really bad analogy for the Trinity. So it's 2 types of cereal that are together in one box in one eating experience.
It's like the hypostatic.
Pre-mixed.
We'll call it that.
What?
It's the hypostatic union. That's what I'm.
This is so heretical. Yeah. So they're homoousios.
Man, John, you deserve an A for that hypostatic union.
Right, exactly.
Reference. Gosh.
Yeah. Anyways, pre-mixed up cereal. I think it's a game changer. We're not sponsored by Kellogg's, but if Kellogg's would like to sponsor, I'm now your biggest fan and spokesperson. So.
I love it. I'm just trying to think of,
that was a hard one to follow, John. No worries.
Gosh, there's 2, and I'm not sure what to, because I thought you were going to say another one. Then you went with the cereal.
Oh,
so the one you're is the whole like Wall Street bets, like the Reddit. If you know what Reddit is, it's a news. I don't know. People post news links, and it's usually just used by millennials. So people who listen to this podcast may not even know what Reddit is. But there's a group, and they drove up the price of these like obsolete stocks that companies that other rich stock market people think are going to go out of business, like GameStop and like AMC movie theaters. And because you can download games and movies, and so why go to a physical place? And they drove up the price to people made like millions of dollars, like hundreds of percents, and just it caused this whole big thing, and this whole big thing in the news this week. But the other one I was going to say, besides that, is that really inspiring story in the NFL. Okay, and Jonah, you'll appreciate this. For a journeyman, he's never won this before. Journeyman quarterback, 43-year-old Tom Brady won his very first NFC Championship game. Oh man, you got to feel for him. He's been in the league all these years, and he's never won the NFC Championship. And he finally did. So, aren't you inspired by that?
I don't know if inspired is the word I would use. It's a strong word.
Okay.
I have strong feelings about it.
So we will see in the Super Bowl for, I don't know. Has he ever something like that? I don't know.
That is weird. Like, I don't know if you're listening to this, if your parents are 43 or if you remember when they were. I can't imagine my dad at 43 playing in a Super Bowl. Yeah, it's weird. It's crazy. It's strange. I don't like Tom Brady, but man, I'm impressed.
I feel like if I at 31 played in an NFL game, like I would be crippled for life. Like I can't imagine a 43-year-old. Yeah.
Man, I would have been crippled at 20. So there you go.
Yep.
All right, Greg. Last word. What's the thing?
Man, guys, those are hard to follow up. Mine's just a super dorky event that's been happening in my backyard every day. So during last March or whatever it was, during the stay-at-home order here in Oregon, I kind of got this idea. I'm just going to kind of create kind of like a bird paradise in my backyard, right? So I've kind of been building up this following of birds that hang out in my backyard. It's really easy to do. You just throw a lot of bird seeds out all the time. So anyways, fast forward to January, right? And this week I have this covey. I don't know if you know that's what a group of quail are called. It's a covey. Okay. Covey, just in case. There you go. Freebie. Covey of quail have been showing up, and literally it just blows me away. You should see me. Like I see one start kind of coming down the we live like in the forest, right? So I see this one quail, kind of the papa quail, coming down, and he kind of is looking around, and then after him, there's a quail after quail after quail, and they all in a single line moving into my backyard. And you should see me. My kids are laughing at me because I'm like peeking out the back window going, okay, here comes Papa Quail. Here's Mama Quail. And I'm starting to name these guys now. And so this week when it snowed here in Portland, right? I don't know if you guys got snow at your house, but I got snow at my house in Oregon City. And the quail showed up, and they're digging through the snow to get to the seeds. And man, I just can't get that out of my mind this week. I'm just falling in love with the birds in my backyard, even in the midst of winter. So I think I have completely lost it in the midst of this pandemic because I'm I don't know. I'm just appreciating the birds around my yard these days. So that's what I can't get over, I guess. That was really lame, but there you go.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
You have international missionary with children at risk. You have university and program director, but quail whisperer is probably
Oh man, I should put that in my bio.
That's right. Got a comment.
Well, I'm trying to get to the point where they see me now, and I'm throwing out the seeds, and they'll just kind of come up to me like pigeons would, but I haven't quite reached that relationship yet with them.
All right. Someday. I look forward to an update on seeing that division could be reconciled right there. That gap between.
Yeah, that would be very Trinitarian to me, wouldn't it?
Very Imago Dei, yes.
On that note, I think we're going to wrap up the podcast. So, Dr. Burch, thank you once again for joining us. It's been a great conversation, and I really look forward to hearing how this quail colony continues to grow. So, just thank you again. More importantly, for talking about children at risk and what you do at Multnomah. I think we're really grateful for your work.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And I'll be praying as we get off even now that God will use this to encourage all of us to keep our eyes open for kids that are at risk in our community. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much. And to all the viewers, we will see you next week. We are live Thursdays at 4 p.m. Have a good week. And we will cut it there.
Perfect.
So I haven't seen any questions in the comments. So that's the end of our podcast recording. That's all. I'm going to cut out the audio after that point.
Sounds good.
But we had like 4 or 5 live at one point.
I see Angie mentioning Burch's Perches. I love that.
I thought it was really good. I wanted
great,
to know how great that was, but I didn't want to like get him off. That was clever. I like it.
That's really good. That's really good.
Okay.
Ooh.
I have a question. Jon, you want to read it?
Yeah, in regards to sustainability and missions, what is something you've heard about that is either already happening or is in the works that excites you?
So there's a deep connection between the physical creation and us as people. We're part of that physical creation. And so I've had the opportunity to work with a few students in our graduate degree that are focusing on creating clean energy for folks in Eastern Africa. And this is really exciting. I just joined the board of this organization called East Africa Energy Solutions. Okay. And they're connecting the dots that if people have access to clean energy in their communities, they're going to have less health concerns. Let's say, if you're using fuel wood, if you're using charcoal or wood inside of your house, that creates smoke and that creates health problems for everybody in your family, including your infant children and so forth. So with East Africa Energy Solutions, what they're doing in this area of sustainability is they're using biodigesters. Biodigesters use cow manure, or actually use any manure really, and converts that into methane gas. Obviously, this would be on the outside of your house, but it looks like a greenhouse, but it's actually this giant rubber bladder, and you can put food waste and manure and so forth inside that giant bladder, and it converts it into methane gas, which you can use to help run your stove, and you could even, if you had the right technology, run your utilities in your house. And so what they're doing is, as followers of Christ, they're going into these communities in Uganda right now, and they're helping them to install these biodigesters, creating efficient and clean energy for families, limiting the risks that they're facing. And they're doing all this in the name of Christ because Jesus is concerned about the health, obviously the spiritual health, but also the physical health of people as well. So I think it demonstrates the gospel in loving our neighbor in a very effective way. And so that's one of the ways that I'm starting to see in sustainability groups like East Africa Energy Solutions and many others kind of caring for people, caring for God's creation. And we've also seen this in the area of areas, people just planting trees, trying to, where you have deforestation, you have erosion, and erosion takes away the topsoil, so families can't produce good nutritional crops for their families. And that's another way that we can just be concerned with caring for God's creation and also concerned with the people that live in that creation. And that's really a missional kind of way to engage in this area of sustainability.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's great technology. Could you imagine? I mean, you've been, growing up in Southern California and driving up here, if they converted all those massive like ranches, or they're not even ranches, they're like cow farms, right? In like Central California.
Yeah.
That methane gas. Wow.
That's what is it? Stockton, California, right? There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of cows. Yeah, there's so much potential there to do some really positive stuff with cow poop.
I love it. That's a quote right there.
For Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Carver and the peanut, except it's
not a peanut. That's what it. Yeah, that's what it is.
All right. think this will be our last question. Who has inspired you in the past, present, even future in global missions?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll start with the past. Like historically, people like Hudson Taylor, obviously. Hudson Taylor, he was a missionary who started the China Inland Mission, which is now OMF. Worked in one of the first missionaries to work in the inland of China, wasn't on the coast, and he was very contextual. So he understood his context and became as Chinese as he could possibly be, being from the UK, being from Britain. He took on traditional Chinese dress. He, spoke Mandarin. He was very contextual in planting churches, and so he deeply impacted me. Amy Carmichael, who was a part of rescuing child prostitutes in India for many years. William Carey, also another missionary, founder of the Protestant missionary movement. Those are people in the past. People in the present are, it's mostly the kids that I used to work with that just have deeply impacted me in the fact that they've been transformed by Jesus and are now caring for other kids that are at risk. They've put a significant place in inspiring me. I think of some students that we have in Vienna, Austria, that are helping and supporting people that are caught up in human trafficking. Others that are working with refugees in places like Greece and Turkey and Lebanon deeply inspire me as well. Loving refugees in the name of Christ and also planting churches and supporting them. The future, well, it'll be my students, no doubt, because I see them training, I see their passions and what they're doing in the future, and that deeply inspires me. And I can't wait to visit them around the world.
It's fantastic. All right, I lied. I said it was the last question, but this will be the last question. This is a funny one.
It's a good question. Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering if you'd want to do it or cut it.
Do you have any stereotypes about seminary students?
Oh no, this is for me?
That's for you.
This box to me is all my stereotypes.
Oh gosh, you guys. I do teach some of our seminary classes, but I'm not around a whole lot of our seminary students all the time.
That's true. That's true.
Oh, geez. I don't even know if I want to go there, to be honest with you. I'm afraid of offending somebody. How about they love Jesus? I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, man. And, great question. Give me a week to think about it.
That's a fantastic answer. That's the one. That's the right answer. Yeah. No one's going to get mad about that one.
I'm feeling like
they use Trinitarian, and they use what was the other term? Imago Dei.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Those seminary students.
I'm feeling like late to class, but had enough time to get a
coffee. Yeah.
It doesn't read the syllabus. I feel like that's in a nutshell for me.
Beards. Everyone has beards. Might be a Portland thing. I can't grow a beard, and I don't ever think about that unless I'm in a seminary class, and I look around. I'm the only clean shaven person. So,
Jonah, don't worry about it. I had to wait till I turned like 45 before I could grow a little semi beard. So,
oh man,
hey, there's hope for you, Jonah.
Yep. We're not done yet. Hopefully, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. I know you got to get around to a class, but appreciate you joining us. And yeah, it's been a good talk. Appreciate it.
I hope it can be used by the Lord to impact somebody.
Mm.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Thank you, Angie, for managing everything.
Yes.
And for coining Burch's Perches. I love it.
Yep.
Should hang up a sign.